Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Friday, September the 3rd, 2021. First up, oh no, it's Karen. A woman called Kat Rosenfield has a piece on unheard.com called Are White Feminists Evil? New anti-racist books don't understand the true power of modern feminism. That's what I always like to see. Feminist on feminist action. Can't be beat. As she begins, the evolution of middle-aged white women into fearsome specters of villainy has been just over a year in the making. It started in Central Park last May, when a woman named Amy Cooper was filmed making a 911 call in which she claimed that a black man was threatening her life. This 40-second video hit the internet at almost exactly the same time as another one, the one capturing the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. These two incidents were connected by neither geography, subject matter, or substance. The first was a tense but ultimately toothless conflict between two neurotic New Yorkers in which nobody got hurt. Well, the second captured not just a horrific tragedy, but a gross abuse of police power again. It didn't matter. Within hours, the two viral moments had fused in the public consciousness to create a monster, literally. She was a boogeyman spawned on social media, one we loathed and feared in equal measure. And because we live in the age of movies spawned by memes, she's coming soon to a cinema near you. A bedraggled and atrociously hairstyled Taryn Manning will be playing a villainous white woman who antagonizes the sweet and blameless black family who've just moved in down the street. She's the embodiment of all evil, the manager calling bigot next door, the proud owner of a soap dispenser emblazoned with the Confederate flag. Her name, of course, in the movies is Karen. You don't have to see Karen, and based on the trailer, it looks like a pile of hot garbage, to know how it will end. The villainess will come to a brutally but suitably violent end, and we'll all learn an important, even life-changing lesson about embracing diversity and equity, lest one end up disemboweled by a wine opener. Manning herself believes that Karen will pack a powerful, even global punch. I felt a social responsibility to take on this role, she told Deadline. Even if I had to play the villain to effect change around the globe, then I was more than willing to step into the role. Brave, brave, brave woman. It's time for change, and for me to be part of the bigger picture meant a lot to me. Alas, Hollywood has but one Karen to cast. But for white women who yearn to effect change by embracing their own inner villain, two new books offer a way forward. Nova reads The Good Ally and Rafia Zakaria's Against White Feminism, both published this month, invite white women everywhere into a new, exciting role, that of the bad guy. I felt like I was being eaten alive by a pack of wolves, Reed writes early on in her book, but the feeding frenzy she describes isn't a brutal racist attack. It's how she felt after George Floyd's murder in 2020, fielding calls and emails from people who wanted to hire her as a diversity consultant. The tragedy in Minneapolis triggered an international wave of reckoning, again, dread word. And being recognized as an expert in her field, people turned to Reed for help. And those wolves, white women, entitled, hungry, snarling. The white feminist antagonist inflicting countless harms in her desperation to do good appears in both Reed and Zakaria's books. But it's in Against White Feminism that the critique is sharpened to a point. Not that readers should feel attacked, mind you. Quote, white women must not feel that the critique of whiteness within feminism is some crude intimidation tactic meant to silence them together, unquote. Oh no, don't ever think that. Even as Zakaria insists on the importance of denouncing those who cling to exclusionary histories, stories, and forms, so you may be denounced, but don't let it intimidate you. Reed, meanwhile, assures her reader any discomfort you feel is temporary and pales in comparison to what Black people and people of color often have to experience on a daily basis. In reading these books, Reed and Zakaria become an omniscient authority. one who has never met you but knows you better than you know yourself. Zakaria explains that people of color understand white women fluently as a matter of necessity. This is the natural outgrowth of the need to survive in a white-run world. In practice, this means that Zakaria spends much of the book ascribing intent and motive to the behaviors of various white women. Needless to say, her interpretation is not flattering. This is not a new phenomenon. Decades ago in Canada, a woman called June Callwood, who was a rather somewhat legendary figure in Canadian society and a tireless early feminist advocate, battered women's shelters and all that sort of thing. She ended up being subjected to a public struggle session. I think this was in the 1980s, where a bunch of women of color ranted on about her being a white woman and a feminist. So, as I say, not a new thing. But let's go back to the essay here. White women's reactions, or in some cases what Zakaria imagines those reactions might be, are presented in terms of expressions of fragility, of defensiveness, of grasping hunger for power. For instance, Zakaria was married young to an abusive husband, a terrible situation from which she ultimately fled. But when the opportunity comes to tell this story to a group of friends, she assumes that this is beyond the scope of any white woman's experience. In fact, she doesn't tell the story at all, lest the other women, quote, demote me mentally below the women who do the real work of feminism. Yes, this Zakaria woman, she is the whole package. I know that my companion's world is split into women of color who have stories to tell and white women who have power and an inherently feminist outlook, she writes. Remarkably, she's so certain of this that she never actually tests her hypothesis. Instead, she tells a shortened version of her life story and then quickly resents her friends for the rest of the night, first for their imagined lack of empathy, and then for failing to notice when she pays more than her fair share of the bill. Zakaria, unlike her prettily dressed, slightly soused, fashionably woke companions, had refrained from drinking, a decision for which she also imagines she is being judged. Zakaria is deeply suspicious of white women, perhaps reasonably so. Why? Why reasonably so? But it's hard to separate her historical analysis of white feminism from the grudges that animate the book's more personal sections. You mean a feminist has written a book which is basically just a concatenation of grudges? Oh, well, I never. Her anecdotes often include snide observations about other women's physical appearances. Zakaria is antagonized by a smug white professor seen duly sporting the scarves and baubles of the well-traveled, or a willowy blonde with her hair in braids. And while she assures us that white women need not feel attacked, this may prove difficult even for the most open-minded reader. The words white women appear in Zakaria's book 161 times. The book is 245 pages long. Willowy blonde gives the game away. I've seen this over and over again with furious feminist women from the Indian subcontinent that they hate blondes with a passion. Now, why would that be? Well, because in Britain and in North America, blondes are held to be highly sexually desirable, and women who look like Zakaria are not. It really is that simple. To go back to the essay, sometimes the entire case for this or that thing has been fundamentally white feminist seems to rest on the presence of an individual white woman somewhere in the equation. One chapter, titled White Feminists and Feminist Wars, seeks to frame the war on terror as a white feminist exercise, primarily through the lens of Zero Dark 30, the movie about the killing of Osama bin Laden, and its female CIA agent, Maya, who was instrumental in the operation's success. Here, too, Zakaria's personal experience ends up dominating the narrative. She dwells at length on the screening she attended of Zero Dark 30 at a movie theater in Indiana, where the crowd repeatedly cheered at the sight of a brown man being waterboarded, then gave the movie a standing ovation while Zakaria wept despondently in her seat. A side note, I know the notion of a bunch of red state yokels cheering for torture scenes before leaping to its feet to applaud the end of Zero Dark 30. In fact, a pretty meditative work that in no way glamorizes or glosses over the horrors of the operation that killed Osama bin Laden, may hew believably to certain ugly stereotypes about the American Midwest. But if you've ever actually seen a movie in the US, this scene is so out of keeping with how audiences usually behave that it's hard to believe that it's entirely factual, or, as I would say, it's almost certainly made up. Amid this myopic focus on a fictional CIA agent and a handful of real-life female soldiers, one could almost forget that the American War on Terror was enacted, strategized, and fought almost exclusively by men. And indeed, overlooking the role of men in lieu of vilifying white women is a recurrent theme in Against White Feminism. In one chapter, Zakaria blames self-declared feminists after an article she wrote for Dissent magazine is met with an Islamophobic response, even though the ugly backlash was apparently fueled by a male editor. In another, she recounts showing up to an event that was billed to her as a speaking engagement, but turned out humiliatingly to be a sort of global bazaar, at which she was supposed to man a table of Pakistani handcrafts. Zakaria was urged to attend by two friends, both men, who evidently misinformed her about the nature of the event, but rather than blame them, her contempt falls squarely on the women in attendance. She rages at the organizers, at the white women drinking wine and buying crafts, and particularly at the black and brown women doing the bidding of my handler and others of her kind. Yes, I think North America needs many, many more Zakarias. They add so much. They're just so enriching. I mean, if by enriching you mean hateful and deranged. In some cases, her anger at the dictatorial feminism practiced by those would-be do-gooders is oddly reminiscent of the right-wing critiques that have lately proliferated surrounding the failed American operation in Afghanistan. Both Zakaria and Tucker Carlson have similar things to say about the usefulness of neoliberalism in a nation ruled by tribal politics and religion and its attempted imposition of Western gender roles on Afghan women. At any rate, it's hard to see what the individual white women who make up her readership are meant to do with this information. So where does this leave Karen? Out of commission, probably. If she reads Against White Feminism, she'll be too busy wallowing neck deep, in self-flagellating guilt to get busy making a difference, or indeed even have the faintest idea how she'd begin to do so. If she takes the advice of the good ally, she'll be journaling through her awakening with the evangelical zeal of the alcoholic, trying to white-knuckle his way through the early days of sobriety. Reed warns, the magnetic undercurrent of white supremacy is a force to be reckoned with and will tempt you to go back to your comfort zone when it gets too hard. Neither book offers concrete solutions. Indeed, one gets the impression that asking for them would be just another expression of white feminist entitlement. But that's fine. Readers don't buy these books because they want to be efficient activists. They buy them to marinate in the vision they sell. Because while white feminism probably isn't to blame for every last one of the world's ills, there's a particular breed of guilty white liberal woman quite eager to believe it is. Well, yes, as I like to say, intersectionality is the war of all against all. And yes, my name is Zakaria. I come from Pakistan, and I am here to tell you stupid Americans how you get everything wrong. I'm an immigrant, or the daughter of an immigrant, and I am a person of color, and I am Islamic, at least from background. And so, checkmate. Shut up and do as I say. As for the Karen incident in Central Park, I don't believe this story, and I've never believed this story. Here you have a large black man and a small white woman who says to her, you do what you have to do and I'll do what I have to do, which sounds very much like a threat to me. What was he doing there, by the way, this black homosexual? Oh, he was bird watching. So that's what they're calling it these days. I watched the trailer for Karen, and it is every bit as bad as Kat Rosenfield suggested. Apparently, you put all the best bits in the trailer now, and if these are the best bits, well, so some sort of dinner party, Taryn Manning comes over, and the black wife is in the kitchen, and she says, "Oh, still slaving over a hot stove." Oh my God. She said slaving to a black woman. Well, still slaving over a hot stove is a cliche that goes back, well, it's older than I am. What sort of normal person would feel terribly offended by this? Now, as far as the casting goes, Taryn Manning is a crazy lesbian. So for her to play a crazy person with, again, a terrible wig, and it is just, you've got police officers saying to some innocent young black man, "Shut up, boy," as if it's, Bull Connor and 1965. They're the kind of women that would actually, have a soap dispenser with a Confederate flag on it. I mean, who does that? Who would do that? Not the type of women who live in this exceedingly upscale neighborhood that is depicted in this film. But it's just all piled on so high that the life of black people in America is one of unrelieved horror. Never mind the fact that a great many black people in the United States have, since the 1960s and the end of segregation, deliberately moved into white neighborhoods because they feel safer there. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Head McNeck, Quachalango, Anrun, Dan, John S., William Hicks, Gamion, Chogokin 666 says, "Effect change, another on my ban list." Gamion says, "For real, so tired of all these phrases they constantly used." No, Sleep Till Breezewood PA says, "That thing isn't happening and it's good that it is." Yes, indeed. William Hicks says, "Every time I hear about a Karen, I think of Karen Carpenter and start singing 'We've Only Just Begun.'" Oh, I don't like to think of Karen Carpenter. What a sad story. William Hicks says, "Willowy blonde, not voluptuous, sensual, hottie." Gamion says, "Willowy blonde, can the envy be more obvious?" Yes, there was this Canadian woman originally from Kashmir, or her family was from Kashmir, and she is an editor at BuzzFeed, I think. There was a fuss a few years ago when she was constantly railing against blonde women, how much she hates blonde women. It's always personal with those people. Hello to Mr. Marvel. Hello to Steve, who says, "Yeah, go to a movie theater full of black people and tell me how well behaved the audience is." Gamion says, "Strangely, Google Images actually returns images of willowy blondes, sans black women or trans women." Anwar says, "I'm embarrassed to say I used to sort of like Zakaria years ago." That would be Fareed Zakaria, the plagiarist. Now I see or hear him and immediately picture and hear Al Pacino in Glengarry Glen Ross. Oh, I'm not going to repeat the end of that. So basically, she is full of ressentiment, says Chogokin 666. Oscar Toe says, Cotto, is Joseph Cotto, is that his name? Really hates this abortion ban in Texas. William Hicks says, "Zero Dark 30, okay film, has some interesting sequences. Not a fan of Jessica Chastain's acting." Neither am I, but she is very pretty, you'd have to admit. The story is bunk. It was uncovered that he constantly did this. He hated dogs, and he had confronted blacks as well. One was a witness, says Chogokin 666. Yes, I saw an article to this extent a couple of weeks ago. Philip Daniel, hello, says stop consuming pop culture. He's a Chamber of Commerce Republican teleported in from 1985. Quechalango says cottager. I was surprised to see how far back giving the picture away in trailers goes. Hollywood has been doing this for many years. That's why I stopped watching trailers of any movie that I might want to see. There was some police procedural thriller, what, a terrorist perhaps, that I remember seeing the trailer for. And that actor, that balding actor who was disgraced for sex with a 14-year-old or coming onto a 14-year-old. I'm trying to remember his name. They give away the ending, in the trailer. But of course, the most famous example or the most notorious example of this is Robert Zemeckis' Swept Away. Why would you do that? Zemeckis said that people want the movies to be like McDonald's. They want to know exactly what it's going to be like before they go in. Oscar Toe says every time the GOP does something right or fights for something, Cotto was like, uh-oh, we aren't ever winning Georgia again. Oscar Toe says Al Pacino's best acting was in the Dunkachino commercial. Ooh, yeah, that is pretty terrible. But again, I'm going to mention pitch meetings again. This was really brought home to me. Why is this scene in the movie? Because we're going to put it in the trailer. Oh, yes, of course. We're going to put it in the trailer. Cast Away, but I do need to watch the original Swept Away. All right, that's from No Sleep Till Breezewood, PA. I was thinking, I made up in my head my own cut for a Castaway trailer. And I think you could do it without any dialogue. You just, diegetic noises, perhaps. You just show Tom Hanks and his busy life. And how he's, called away from his family, traveling all over the world for Federal Express. And then we see him on that horrific journey on the airplane in the storm. And then the screen goes black. And then you fade in a beach, a white sand beach with the waves hitting the beach. And that's the end of the trailer. I thought that would be good. Oscar Toe says also Kevin the Perry Mason I watched last night had Louise Fletcher, a.k.a. Nurse Ratched. Yeah. Kind of difficult for Louise Fletcher to get roles that weren't horrible after One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But she was in this movie called Brainstorm with Christopher Walken. And if I've got the name of that, it was directed by Douglas Trumbull, the famous special effects wizard who worked on 2001. Natalie Wood. Of course, there's a whole scandal about this because of the death, of Natalie Wood. Cliff Robertson. It's a very fascinating premise about virtual reality. And of course, virtual reality is going to, it's going to lead to people, addicted to ultra realistic virtual sexual experiences. Also, it can be weaponized by the military to torture people. But Louise Fletcher is in that, and she's quite good, actually. Let's talk about exhaustion. So many women are so very exhausted these days, particularly Black women. I'm always amused. Oh, exhausted, so tired, so very tired. Why are you tweeting like 30 times a day on Twitter then? Why are you constantly on Instagram or making TikTok videos if you are so exhausted? They're just making it up. I missed this first time around. It appeared August the 20th. It's a piece by Amanda Miller Littlejohn, and it is called Black Professional Women Are Exhausted. They're finally claiming the time to rest. Inspired by Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, many of the Black women I know in the business world say they are taking steps this year to reclaim their rest. Okay. Last December, I delivered a baby by complicated cesarean section. Okay, that's confusing. Are you a physician or what? I was one of those people you hear about sending work emails from her hospital bed. Yeah, I love the humble bragging right out of the gate. Once out of surgery and home with my baby, I chose to forego maternity leave and continue working. Why? Are you irreplaceable, indispensable? No one's going to think badly of you of taking your maternity leave after giving birth to a child, particularly after a complicated cesarean section. About a month later, exhausted, I came down with a breast infection and a 103.5 degree fever. As I lay in bed in a pool of sweat trying to recover from the single biggest medical event of my life during a pandemic, I wondered, why hadn't I taken a break? Why? Indeed, once again, no one is going to think the worse of you for doing that. The absurdity of the situation forced me to take a long, hard look at myself. It would be different if I were responding to the demands of an unreasonable boss. In this case, I was the unreasonable one. Then Naomi Osaka pulled out of the French Open, citing her mental health. Several weeks later, Simone Biles withdrew from Olympic competition. Unlike me, both Black women chose to put their own health and well-being above the demands of their professions. Well, that's one way to put it. It struck a chord with me and many of the Black women I know. In my business as an executive branding coach, started laughing. Executive branding coach? I'm reminded of Office Space. What is it, would you say, that you do here? I work with professional Black women who, while not competing on international athletic stages, are all accustomed to the rigors of competitive work. This year, my current and former clients have all said in one way or another that they're tapped out. They've started to intentionally reclaim their rest. Oh, I hope this phrase does not get to be a thing. One such woman is Amber Cabral, who runs a boutique diversity and inclusion firm. Again, what is it that you say that you do here? Based in Atlanta, and who I am currently coaching. Last May, after George Floyd's murder, the demand for her training services grew so much, she was often working 12 to 14-hour days, sometimes at odd hours, to accommodate her clients in different time zones. Cabral was already on the brink of burnout when her godmother died suddenly in June. After the funeral, she booked a flight to Anguilla and took a week off to grieve. Days into her vacation, she realized she'd missed the deadline to submit a proposal to a new major client. I don't drop balls. That doesn't happen to me, Cabral said. But I was just so exhausted that when I went to Anguilla, I let everything go. Diversity coach, diversity good, whiteness bad. Did you get that? I can repeat it, and at length. I'll just read from that book, Robin DiAngelo, okay? Diversity good, okay? Whiteness bad. Yeah, you're starting to get it, aren't you? That sounds like just exhausting work. After quickly trying to pull something together on vacation, she decided to come clean, let the client know what was going on. I started to type the proposal. I started working on it, and my body was like, no, we're on vacation. She remembered her recently declared company values, health, rest, and well-being. That's the thing we should be focusing on. The client was gracious and expressed hope they'd work together in the future. Like me, Cabral didn't automatically choose to rest when extenuating personal circumstances changed her capacity. Me. It's always about me, these stories. Black women have been groomed to overachieve, she said. We know how to boss up and get it done. So it's about reprogramming the idea that it's weak to say you can't do more. Reba Peoples, a psychiatrist and founder of Imara Health and Wellness Center in Atlanta, who specializes in helping women do this kind of reprogramming, says the inability to rest is equal parts history and science, or perhaps equal parts narcissism and delusion. We live in a culture that values productivity, so we're measured by that capacity to produce, people said. But for Black people, that idea goes even deeper, because our enslaved ancestors were literally valued based on their capacity to produce labor. Not working up to capacity could be beatings, or you could be sold off and separated from your family. So it was dangerous to rest, and we've had that encoded into our DNA. These things are encoded in one's DNA. Really? Last year, Kimberly Boyd Lewis, an executive coach. Do any of these people have real jobs in the DC area who I worked with in 2017, saw how dangerous it was to rest when she lost two close friends and her aunt in close succession. Then her father-in-law had a car accident that left his back broken in 4 places. Grieving and exhausted, she shared her need to take a step back at work. She says her boss, a white woman, explicitly told her she needed to push through anyway. Wow, a real Karen. I was exhausted, but expectations for me in my role were very different as a Black woman. And I had other white female colleagues tell me that. She left the job a few months later. Yes, apparently it is only Black women who have bad bosses. Yes, okay. Until this year, former client and DC-based corporate executive, and what kind of business, I wonder? Quiana Smith believed that outworking others was the key to her success. Once the pandemic took hold, she found herself working 12-hour days on her firm's busy government practice. The schedule was a lot, even for her. She took off work in July, intending to take a trip. I did not realize how exhausted I was until I actually stopped and I didn't do anything, she said. In my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to take a trip somewhere during this 3-week period. And I was too exhausted to even do that, Smith said. Instead, she took a staycation, which gave her time to think and reflect. I focus on doing and producing to feel as though I'm providing value when the truth is my being is valuable. That's generally not how it works in the workplace. Unless, of course, you get the dream job, which is, charging clients $100, $200, $500 an hour for telling them about your lived experience. Rest is important because having that chance for your limbic system to quiet down and your frontal lobes to come online allows you to reason. You have space to make proactive decisions, rather than reactive responses. That's what happened when Christian C.C. Battle left her job last year as executive director of a national nonprofit. I coached Battle in 2015. Coach what? What kind of coaching are we talking about? Amanda Miller Littlejohn is a writer and executive branding coach in Washington, D.C. Once again, nice work if you can get it. I was talking yesterday about this narrative shift, dread phrase, in the Canadian election, where at the beginning it's like Aaron O'Toole, what a loser. He's going to be kicked out of his job as leader of the Conservative Party after his embarrassing role in the Conservatives' defeat. Well, it hasn't exactly turned out that way, and you just see how the media is absolutely shameless. They'll just turn on a dime. This is from Kate Bolingaro at Bloomberg. Trudeau tumbles further behind Conservative freight train. It's just unstoppable. Okay. And this is from Rachel Gilmore at Global News. O'Toole pledges to keep assault rifle ban. His platform says it'll be gone. Here's what we know. Yeah, guess what? Aaron O'Toole decides to win the support of gun owners, and then it's like, to hell with you. Okay? Oh, you believed me when I told you that I would repeal the liberal ban on so-called assault rifles. You know, how a reporter can use the term assault rifles without putting it in inverted commas. Well, I mean, this is global news, so what do you expect? Criselli at the National Post writes, first leaders debate a showdown between two visions of federalism. Where, yes, Quebec, what do you want, Quebec? And one side says, yeah, we'll give you whatever you want, except we have to, maintain some sort of pretense that Quebec is actually a province like all the others. And the other side, the conservatives, said, no, we'll give you whatever you like, infinitely. That this will simply lead to more demands and more blackmail, as has been clear since, the late 1960s, that doesn't matter. But what's amusing to me in this, 3 leaders' debates before the election, 2 in French, 1 in English. Quebec is, last time I checked, something like 22% of the Canadian population, but they get 67% of the debates. Back to Max Fawcett at the National Observer. Don't believe for a second the issue of abortion is closed for debate. Well, Aaron O'Toole actually calls himself pro-choice. And nope, not going to change the law, not going to change it, not going to change it, not going to change it. It's never enough. Never enough. I mean, what would Aaron O'Toole have to do in order to persuade Max Fawcett that he was really sincere, that under his prime ministership, abortion law, well, Canada doesn't have any abortion law, is not going to be changed. His wife having an abortion, filmed and upstream live to the internet, would that do it, Max Fawcett? It's not often that events in Texas impact elections in Canada, but the new anti-abortion law that came just into effect in the Lone Star State is no ordinary event. It seems drawn straight from the pages of The Handmaid's Tale, except that no one is forcibly breeding these women in Texas, Max. Given that it bans abortions after just 6 weeks of pregnancy and allows private citizens to sue abortion providers and anyone else who helps a woman get an abortion and potentially receive a bounty of up to $10,000. Well, apparently there are people in the Conservative caucus who are not all that keen on abortion. And apparently there are, according to this, 300,000 Canadians who belong to an anti-abortion organization. It makes no difference. Even if all of the 60-something allegedly anti-abortion MPs in the Conservative Party, if they voted for some sort of regulation of abortion, the rest of the Conservative Party, plus the votes of every other party, would mean that this legislation would fail. Max Fawcett knows that, but he pretends otherwise. The sickness unto death, that is topic number 2. This is a reference to a famous work of philosophy by the Dane Soren Kierkegaard, which appeared in 1849. So what is the sickness unto death? Well, it is despair. And this is what we're seeing now with regard to COVID-19, despair, flat out despair. Oh my God, COVID zero apparently is not going to happen. We're going to be stuck with this disease, which is going to be mutating endlessly. And there are these horrible people who refuse to wear masks or get vaccinated, and they're trying to kill us all. And I'm afraid to leave my apartment. And yeah, this has been going on for 18, 19 months now. And as they say, this one will run and run. But it occurred to me yesterday, is there a correlation between belief in God and lack of COVID panic? And I think I have found a correlation. There is a rivalry between the two Australasian countries, Australia and New Zealand, about, which is the craziest with regard to COVID. Well, let's look at religion in New Zealand. And I'm looking at the Wikipedia page here. almost half, 48.6% of New Zealanders stated they had no religion in the 2018 census, and 6.7% made no declaration. So New Zealand is pretty much officially an atheist country. How about Australia? In the optional question of the 2016 census, 52.2% of the Australian population declared some variety of Christianity. 30.1% of Australians stated no religion, and a further 9.6% chose not to answer the question. Okay, some variety of Christianity, 52.2%. And how many of those have a strong belief in God? Half of them? A quarter, say? That would be my guess. Quebec, the province of Quebec, has had the most draconian anti-COVID policies in Canada. Let's look at their religion. The 2001 census showed the population to be 90.3% Christian with 83.4% Catholic. Ah, yes. However, the traditional practice is followed by 10% of believers in Quebec. So essentially, Quebec is now an atheist province. If one believes that death is the end, then I suppose a great many of these people are going to follow on from that with the belief that all steps must be taken to forestall death. Of course, at the same time, most of these same people laud suicide. It's odd, don't you think? People who believe in God believe that death is not the end, and they typically have a more relaxed attitude towards the prospect of, dying or of avoiding things because they might lead to harm or death. Now, we know that the survival rate of COVID-19 is 99.5%. We also know that the average age people dying of it is 80. We also know that, again, the vast majority of people under the age of 50 who die of COVID, I believe it's 90% or more, have severe comorbidities. But no, COVID-19 is apparently an existential threat, and all must be done to forestall it. And it would be irresponsible. A woman that I'd not heard of before, called Wendy Molyneux, this went viral very, very quickly. Let's look at her Twitter feed. Writer for Bob's Burgers, that's a Fox cartoon, wife of Hate the Drake, co-creator of Great North, which is a show on Fox, available now on Hulu. Oh, and she has her pronouns, she and her. This is an actual headline, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to be profane here because you're not going to get the same effect, okay? Oh my fucking God, get the fucking vaccine already, you fucking fucks. Hi, if you were reading this essay, then congratulations, you are still alive. And if you are alive, then you have either gotten the COVID-19 vaccine or you still have the opportunity to get the vaccine against COVID-19. And holy fuck, if you aren't fucking vaccinated against COVID-19, then you need to get fucking vaccinated right now. I mean, what the fuck? Fuck you. Get vaccinated. Fuck. These people have lost their minds. The efficacy of the vaccines against COVID is going like this. It is cratering. But this doesn't seem to have occurred to Wendy Molyneux. The vaccine also doesn't have a fucking 5G chip in it. Yeah, how many people believe that? The fucking vaccine will not make you magnetic. Oh, you're afraid of fucking side effects? Fuck you. You know what is fucking side effects? Fucking aspirin, fucking Tylenol. You could be fucking allergic to pineapple, you fucking fuckwit. Oh, dear. Everything has side effects. You're being a big fucking baby with a huge diaper full of fucking diarrhea, complaining about maybe feeling slightly tired for a day or two while your asymptomatic COVID case you get and pass on to some innocent fucking kid could wind up killing them or someone else. Oh, really? So those are the only side effects of COVID-19 vaccines. A little tiredness, soreness for a day. What about all those people who just drop dead? What about those people? Because there's more than a few, more than a few. And yes, I'll read a story about one. This is from Alex Berenson at his Substack. So we're clear about this. Patrick Reed's case of COVID is by far the most severe a professional athlete is known to have suffered. Lucky he was vaccinated. It hit me like a brick. Patrick Reed says pneumonia left him fighting for his life. Former master champion was in hospital for 6 days. Reed now hoping he can gain wild card for Ryder Cup. I suppose if you just pretend that there are no side effects, including fatal side effects, well, I guess there aren't. Berenson continues, this is not unlike the reporting on Jesse Jackson, who was now hospitalized with COVID after being vaccinated in January. Headlines report Jackson is in a rehab facility as if he has been discharged from hospital care, when in reality he has been moved to a specialized hospital for intensive occupational and physical therapy, because mRNA vaccines work against severe disease, and don't you dare suggest otherwise. Let's go to the chat. Ed McNeck says, when there are footsteps coming down the hallway at 2 a.m., everyone prays to God. This is like genius writing, says Oscar Toe. Swearing like a sailor, says Dan. Again, I apologize, but you're just not going to get the full effect of this deranged idiocy without speaking the words in full. No sleep till Breezewood PA says, okay, I can give up aspirin and Tylenol. Hello, Kyle Free. Okay, Tylenol is well known. Side effects are well known. Tylenol kills people. Aspirin, oh yeah, might cause stomach bleeding. Drink a glass of water when you take aspirin. That's pretty simple, isn't it? William Hicks says, vax long-term side effects? Nobody knows. British American says, it's funny how, with the overuse of formerly terrible words like asshole, old milder words like goof and jerk are gaining impact. No Sleep Till Breezewood says, new rule, millennials can only curse once a day, and it has to be in noun form instead of adjectives. Okay, we are back full circle to the sand pebbles, says Oscar Toe. Duplessis did nothing wrong, says Yo Mama. Twilight, like Avatar, seems to have been mostly forgotten, says Palcasso88. I forget who it was on Twitter. That is a remarkable phenomenon about Avatar. The most successful movie ever made, and it has vanished from public consciousness. It just vanished. It rose without trace, to use the words of Kitty Muggeridge. I mean, yeah, all those memes on the internet about Avatar and all of the, great stirring or funny lines in Avatar that everyone repeats. No. Nope. Anran says, I could see a great new sub-movie with Bill Paxton if he was still alive, or Leland Orser playing a scared Chogo losing it, endangering the sub and everyone on it. We're getting The Handmaid's Tale again. Is there some wish fulfillment here with all this obsession with The Handmaid's Tale? Is there some sort of desire to actually be dominated sexually by a patriarchy? I suspect that there is, actually. Steve asks, how much of the post-industrial service economy is diversity consultants, life coaches, influencers, and reaction videos? I believed that after the near collapse of the world economy in 2007, 2008, that it would mean big changes And nothing's changed at all, really, except that, those people who are nearly wrecked the world economy, give them more power and more money. See, but what I thought was this. When one looks at all sorts of craziness, political or artistic craziness in particular, up to, say, 2008, there was a surplus produced by capitalism. Now, the Austrians are going to argue that it's all because of borrowing from the 1970s, and they may well be true. But nevertheless, there was a surplus. And so, what did that mean? Performance art, Amanda Palmer, just worthless, parasitical things. And I thought, well, these things are going to disappear because there isn't the money for them. Well, I was wrong. I didn't understand, the ability of government to just borrow on a scale unprecedented and just dole it out to people performing parasitic activities. Also, I misunderstood the power of NGOs. They have enormous power, influence, and money. And when they see something stupid and parasitic, they say, how can we help you? Okay, let's see. Let's move on here. Give me a second. We got more. And this is what they don't want to talk about. This is from Connor Boyd at the Daily Mail. Israel has become the COVID capital of the world, despite leading the charge on vaccines, and a clear warning sign that Britain, the US, and other highly immunized nations are still vulnerable to another wave. Stats compiled by Oxford University-backed research team Our World in Data shows that there were a record 1,892 COVID cases per million people in Israel on Wednesday, nearly 0.2% of the entire population in a single day. This was significantly higher than second worst Mongolia and double the figures for Kosovo, Georgia, and Montenegro. The figure only looks at one day's worth of tests, and Israel's high rate is thought to have been driven up by a large testing push ahead of schools reopening there. But the country has consistently reported some of the highest infection rates in the world since mid-August, amid an unprecedented third wave, despite being one of the most vaccinated nations in the world. For comparison, 522 people per million in the UK tested positive yesterday, and the figure was closer to 595 in the US. It suggests protection gained from vaccines is starting to buckle in the face of the highly transmissible Delta variant. Yes, they can't keep this up for much longer because the figures in the United States and Canada are soon going to be duplicating those of England and Israel. So that paste, it's not always a paste. Sometimes it comes in liquid form or in pill form of a treatment that is called, it begins with an I and ends with an N. I have to be very careful about this. This is an article by Brian Jundeff in American Thinker. Why all the fuss? First, that treatment that begins with an H and ends with an E is the hated deadly drug du jour, castigated by the medical establishment and regulatory authorities. Both drugs have been around for a long time as FDA-approved prescription medications, yet now we are told they are deadly as arsenic. As a physician, I'm certainly aware of the eye drug, but don't recall ever writing a prescription for it in my 30 years plus medical career. The drug is this is a tough one, anthelmintic, meaning it cures parasitic infections. In the world of ophthalmology, it is used on occasion for rare parasitic or worm infections in the eye. I was FDA approved in 1998 under the brand name Stromectol, produced by pharmaceutical giant Merck, approved for several parasitic infections. The product label described it as having a unique mode of action which leads to an increase in the permeability of the cell membrane to chloride ions. This suggests that the eye drug acts as an ionophore, making cell membranes permeable to ions that enter the cell for therapeutic effect. Does the eye drug work in COVID? I'm not attempting to answer that question, instead looking at readily available information because this drug has been the focus of much recent media attention. For the benefit of any reader eager to report this article and author to the medical licensing boards for pushing misleading information, I am not offering medical advice or prescribing anything. Rather, I am only offering commentary on this newsworthy and controversial drug. What's newsworthy about the eye drug? A simple Google search of most medications describe uses and side effects. A similar search of the eye drug provides headlines of why it shouldn't be taken and how dangerous it is. The Guardian describes the eye drug as horse medicine, reminding readers considering taking the drug, you are not a horse, you are not a cow, saying it's a medicine meant for farm animals. The FDA echoed that sentiment in a recent tweet, adding, seriously, y'all, stop it. Their word choice making it obvious who the tweet was directed to. Yeah, we can't have people, well, no, people are obviously the ones most responsible for their own health. But no, we can't have that. We can't have that idea of sovereignty because experts are in charge of our health. This is a piece by Katie Pavlich at a town hall. The left loses their minds over Joe Rogan taking the eye drug, a drug that won a Nobel Prize. Yes, a Nobel Prize, not all that long ago, actually. It is not just a horse drug. From nobelprize.org, William C. Campbell, an expert in parasite biology working in the USA, acquired Omura's Streptomyces cultures and explored their efficacy. Campbell showed that a component from one of the cultures was remarkably efficient against parasites in domestic and farm animals. The bioactive agent was purified and named ivermectin, which was subsequently chemically modified to a more effective compound called the eye drug. The eye drug was later tested in humans with parasitic infections and effectively killed parasite larvae. Collectively, Omura's and Campbell's contributions led to the discovery of a new class of drugs with extraordinary efficacy against parasitic diseases. The eye drug is highly effective against a range of parasites, has limited side effects, and is freely available across the globe. The importance of the eye drug for improving the health and well-being of millions of individuals with river blindness and lymphatic filariasis, primarily in the poorest regions of the world, is immeasurable. Treatment is so successful that these diseases are on the verge of eradication, which would be a major feat in the medical history of mankind. That is from nobelprize.org. They are lying to us. Oh, you're not a horse, you're not a cow. They're lying to us because, well, that's what they've been reduced to. Lies and hysteria. Oh, but it gets worse. Oh, there's more horror to come. This is from Lee Cohen at CBS News. Health officials keeping a very close eye on COVID-19 Mu. Is it Mu or Mu variant? What are they going to do after they run out of the Greek letters? This is from the New York Times. Top federal health officials have told the White House to scale back a plan to offer coronavirus booster shots to the general public later this month, saying that regulators need more time to collect and review all the necessary data, according to people familiar with the discussion. Dr. Janet Woodcock, the acting commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, and Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who heads the Centers for Disease Control, warned the White House Thursday that their agencies may be able to determine in the coming weeks whether to recommend boosters only for recipients of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and possibly just some of them to start. But you know who's raring to go? I'm sure you've guessed. This is from Alexander Nazarian at Yahoo News. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top medical advisor to President Biden, defended the administration's decision to recommend corona vaccine booster shots and said that 3 doses of an mRNA vaccine, not 2, would be the new standard of full vaccination. Yeah, for how long? I wonder. How long? Uh-oh. Here we go. Here it comes. This is from Gabriel Keane at National File. Pharmaceutical megacorporation Pfizer is now developing a COVID pill that is meant to be taken alongside the COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccines that have already made the company a staggering amount of money. The new pill is expected to be released by the end of the year and will be required to be taken twice a day. Success against COVID-19 will likely require both vaccines and treatments, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla said on Wednesday. We're pleased to share we've started a phase 2/3 study of our oral antiviral candidate specifically designed to combat SARS-CoV-2 in non-hospitalized low-risk adults. Oh, and let's go to my little corner of the world. Not acceptable. Island Health CEO says protesters abused, assaulted healthcare workers. From CTV News, Vancouver Island. Island Health's chief executive says the anti-vaccine protests around Vancouver Island on Wednesday led to verbal abuse of healthcare workers and at least one assault. Let's see the video. I am proud my country supports the democratic right to peaceful protest, said Island Health President and CEO Kathy McNeil in a statement Wednesday afternoon. However, some of today's protests disrupted safe access to healthcare activities. What happened to our healthcare teams today is not acceptable to me, nor to the people and communities they serve. Our healthcare teams deserve respect and support, no matter what personal beliefs we hold. No matter what personal beliefs we hold? Golly. Hundreds of people gathered outside the BC Legislature building in Victoria to protest the provincial government's plan to require proof of vaccination for certain non-essential activities, calling it coercive and tyrannical. Other protests were held in cities around BC with an estimated 2,000 people joining a rally outside Vancouver General Hospital on the mainland. In Nanaimo, protesters lined the streets outside Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. A nurse who works there said on Twitter that she had been harassed by the crowd while leaving work. And more news from the island. A rather hilarious clip of a bunch of medical workers in Vancouver, Victoria, almost sobbing. We're working ourselves to death for you people, and you're not respecting us. Too funny. And, in Alberta, I had cheered Jason Kenney. You know I'm not a fan of his, because his government announced a few weeks ago that, life was going to go back to normal. And then this was delayed for several weeks. And now we're hearing that it's going to be called off entirely. This is from the countersignal.com. Alberta NDP leader calls for mandatory vax and QR code vaccine passport. This would affect everyone using non-essential businesses. You know, what's an example of a non-essential business, according to Rachel Notley? Grocery stores. So that's the next step, apparently. We're going to be starved out. Well, you know, I suppose you can order pretty much any kind of food stuff online now. It would be most inconvenient for me, but I'm not going to be starved out. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. The government of South Australia is running a trial for a system that could eventually force citizens to take a photo of themselves via a government app to report their location on demand within 15 minutes of authorities requesting it or face a police investigation. Yes, really. The revelation was highlighted in an Atlantic piece by Connor Friedersdorf, which questions whether Australia can still call itself a liberal democracy in light of the crippling restrictions it has placed on its own population. With no end in sight for the lifting of the country's brutal lockdown, Aussies could face even more invasive state intrusion into their private lives under the justification of stopping the spread of their virus. If people refuse to report their location or are unable to do so, police are then dispatched to hunt them down. We don't tell them how often or when on a random basis. They have to reply within 15 minutes. Watson reports this is barely much different from literally fitting people with electronic ankle bracelets that track their every movement like prisoners under home arrest, a policy that was actually considered by Australian authorities earlier this year. As stated earlier, the Aussies no longer believe in God. So they're terrified. William Briggs, statistician to the stars, has a column yesterday, Case Study in Hysterical Effeminacy, Bad Times Are Coming. All have heard the ancient litany, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. The wise know the cycle is unbreakable. It can be argued which point in the endless circle is best. The strong men who labor to make the good times earn the right to call themselves men. But the men at the start of the good times have the leisure necessary to become scholars and to advance culture. However that debate is resolved, the nadir is clear. It's not the hard times which may be endured, struggled against, and overcome. Those amidst the chaos know the cliché's truth and can take cheer from it. There is nowhere to go but up. Therefore, the worst era is the time of weak men. The time when it is obvious what was lost, to see how easily it could have been saved, to witness the falling off in despair, to see men embrace weakness, to be among those who surrender piece by piece for crumbs of comfort. To that, every day worse is coming. Weakness builds upon itself. The stricken encourage others to join them in their submission. The weak hate the strong because the weak are reminded they could be strong if only they had the will. One example of a weak man encouraging others in his hysterical effeminacy is drawn, as much else is, from the Corona doom. A blubbery bug man, the state of his physique is part of the argument, states his delight in the idea of vaccine mandates. They make him feel safe. Quote, vaccine mandates should be imitated at state and local levels too, and corporate America should follow suit. And we need vaccine passports and vaccination permits before entering public places like restaurants, theaters, and sporting events. Make the selfish and stupid bear the burden of their selfish stupidity, not the rest of it. Briggs comments, this terrified man has no understanding of the relative risks of disease, nor the possibility of vaccine side effects, nor even of the need for vaccines in differing populations. He needs to feel safe. He must have all be as weak as he is. And here's more from this man. My patience being all used up by the intensely selfish and dumb, I replied ungently to a correspondent worried about increasing tyranny. Stop talking like an absolute ass. The unvaxxed have no right whatsoever to threaten the rest of us because they are selfish. You don't want to vax, we don't have to hire you. Own your selfish, stupid choices. Briggs comments, how is it the unvaxxed threaten this dear, poor, sweet creature? He himself is vaxxed, and we can infer he believes the vaccine will protect him from the disease, but not from those who have incorrect beliefs. This weak man, in his abject fear, has lost his ability to reason, and reason, you may be sure, is a matter of supreme importance to him. This is why it would do no good at all, to tell him that if the vaccine protects him from the worst the bug can do, the origin of the bug doesn't matter from a vaxxed or unvaxxed person. And that if he did become infected, he'd not only have the protection created from the vaccine, but also that from defeating the bug itself, though his fat and sloth would work against him. And, okay. Yes, it's not enough that the elite imposes its will on us, but that all expressions of dissent must be silenced. This is from Paul Joseph Watson of Summit News. Reddit has completely banned a vaccine skeptic subreddit just days after CEO Steve Huffman promised not to, while claiming the site values dissent. Well, that lasted long. Dissent is part of Reddit and the foundation of democracy, Huffman wrote in a blog post. Reddit is a place for open and authentic discussion and debate. However, this sentiment wasn't shared by Reddit's notoriously censorious, intolerant left-wing community, which protested against Huffman's free speech stance by switching numerous major subreddits to private and vowing to keep them locked until vaccine skeptics were deplatformed. There was some gossip the other day that Cam Newton was dropped by the New England team in the NFL because he was not vaccinated. Well, Bill Belichick has something to say about that. This is Kane at Citizen Free Press. I would just point out that I don't know what the number is. You guys can look it up. You have the access to a lot of information, but the number of players, coaches, and staff members that have been infected by COVID in this training camp who have been vaccinated is a pretty high number. So I wouldn't lose sight of that. We have other players on the team who are not vaccinated, as I would say probably every other team in the league. And we've had minimal, but throughout the league, there have been a number of, quite high a number, I would say, of players who have had the virus, who have been vaccinated. So the implication that the vaccination solves every problem, I would say that has not been substantiated based on what has transpired in training camp this year. And this is, again, from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. Forbes deleted an article written by an education expert who asserted that forcing children to wear face masks was causing psychological trauma after the piece began to go viral. The article, which is archived, so you can find this at summit.news, was written by Zach Ringelstein, who has a PhD in education from Columbia University and founded Zigadoo, an educational and development app aimed at helping children. Ringelstein explains how he worked hard to remove standardized testing from schools, but that this was derailed when the pandemic began, a process that transformed the American public education system into something unrecognizable, a system of restrictions and mandates far more repressive than standardized testing ever was. Ringelstein attacked the notion that kids are resilient and can overcome the onerous COVID rules imposed on them by asserting, quote, masks and social distancing induce trauma, and trauma at a young age is developmentally dangerous, especially for children who are experiencing trauma in other parts of their lives, unquote. He went further, noting how the new measures were creating classrooms full of lonely, atomized kids. Students in most American classrooms must now wear a covering over their face and stay distanced from their peers the entire school day. In many schools, students are forced to play by themselves during recess. Even for the youngest of school children, desks are in rows, kids can't see each other's smiles or learn critically important social and verbal skills. Neurological research demonstrates that kids who experience this kind of fear and trauma at a young age undergo structural and functional restructuring of their brain's prefrontal cortex, resulting in emotional and cognitive processing problems. Furthermore, children in masks who are socially distanced are more likely to lead a sedentary lifestyle at school and home, and therefore are also more likely to become both obese and depressed. This is from Paul Bedard at the Washington Examiner. A former FCC chairwoman who favored censoring conservative outlets is now calling for a sweeping national plan to silence vaccine and mask critics and a disinformation czar to oversee it all from the liberal Biden White House. The goal spelled out in the plan, pushed by former Democratic Federal Election Commission Chairwoman Ann Revelle, is to kibosh the many conservative voices questioning the anti-COVID policies on social media. In the write-up of the plan, published by CNN, Ravel and Kristen Urquiza cited only conservatives who have questioned the widespread use of masks, including Senator Rand Paul, the Kentucky Republican, and Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Disinformation czar. And more on masks and children. This is from Ronnie Reyes at the Mail. California epidemiology professor blasts CDC guidance calling for kids age 2 and up to be masked to school. Downsides outweigh known benefits, could stunt children's development and trigger vaccine hesitancy. In a column for The Atlantic, Vinay Prasad warned state leaders that forcing young students to wear masks could hinder their language, social, and cultural development skills. Well, it just seems unfair. How come kids don't get to wear masks? Yeah. How about that? They're making, it's bad enough being an adult when the kids have all this freedom that we don't. Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News says, a member of the House of Lords is demanding to know why Brits returning to the UK from abroad are required to take several PCR COVID tests, even if fully vaccinated, while illegal immigrants, the mass majority of whom are unvaccinated, don't have to take a PCS test at all. That's because we're being replaced by people who are better than us. And again, from the Daily Mail, of course, we are all fascinated. We can hardly wait to find out what Prince Harry, the ginger waster, has to say on this subject. McHugh at the Mail writes, why are some people reluctant to be vaccinated against COVID-19? According to the British Medical Association, there is no simple answer to a complex problem. Prince Harry, however, knows better. For our Duke of Epidemiology, the answer is simple. Vaccine hesitancy is the fault of the news media, and no doubt the British press in particular. It was at the GQ Men of the Year Awards in London on Wednesday night, after all, that the Prince, dolled up in black tie and tux, made a surprise appearance by video link from his California mansion. He was there to give an award to the brilliant team behind the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, but his royal wokeness wasn't about to miss the chance to put the boot into the media in front of a star-studded audience. Families everywhere, he pronounced, are, quote, being overwhelmed by mass-scale misinformation across news, scare quotes, and social media, where those who peddle in lies and fear are creating vaccine hesitancy and eroding trust. Oh, I see. Peddling fear, are they? You're not getting much fear about COVID from the mass media. And of course, the British media is overwhelmingly on the side of COVID panic. And Meghan, in the latest Meghan Mertz news from Haley Richardson at the Mail, Meghan Mertz lies dying underneath crashed car, just like Diana, in controversial opening Harry dream sequence of new TV film Escaping the Palace, branded tasteless and abhorrent by royal fans. The film Harry and Meghan Escaping the Palace opens with a horror car crash scene, shows Duchess of Sussex in a bad way begging Prince Harry to help her. The Duke of Sussex then wakes up from the nightmare and sees Meghan and Archie. Outraged royal fans have taken to Twitter, accusing the film of being insensitive. This will show on the U.S. cable channel Lifetime, starting on Monday. And I'm looking at a still, and there's the overturned car. Golly, and it's a Mercedes, the same brand of car that Diana died in. Let's see what Jim Kunstler has to say today. His column is called Coiling and Rattling. Actually, progressive liberal abortion policy never went far enough. If only abortion were retroactive, we could send Joe Biden and maybe all of wokedom back to the pre-embryonic cosmic darkness preceding conception. Otherwise, we'll have to run him out of the Oval Office like some short-timer Guatemalan generalissimo, since he has completed the transition of the USA into a third world backwater and thus served his purpose. These cool and lovely pre-fall nights, Kamala Harris must be chugging Grey Goose by the liter, chasing her Xanax up at the Veeps mansion, the old Naval Observatory, probably the nicest house she'll ever live in, because she's not ever moving into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. No siree. The parties dimly perceived behind all this Meshuggah got it so wrong with her. She was supposed to be an insurance policy against removing JB, while he acted as an automatic legislation signing machine. Oh, yes, let's talk about COVID-19 in this regard. I prefer to label what is going on the long emergency simply the end game of the techno-industrial hypertrophic phase of history. You could see it coming from 100 months away, but now that it's here, Western civ has turned from tragedy to farce to psychosis. The pharmaceutical lobbying group, known as the American Medical Association, called this week for an immediate end to the use of the eye drug to treat COVID-19. They forbid member doctors to prescribe it. They follow the CDC and the FDA in condemning the drug, sentencing it to the ducking stool, burning it at the stake. Use of the eye drug for the prevention and treatment of COVID-19 has been demonstrated to be harmful to patients, they say. They lie, of course, and they want all the doctors to lie. How many of them will go along to get along? Do they care if this psychotic nonsense destroys what remains of medical practice, just as race and gender studies have destroyed higher ed? One not so distant day, the docs will show up for work, but the overgrown hospitals will be out of business, doors shuttered, and the docs will be back to making house calls with a little black bag. No more German cars for you, and maybe a chicken in exchange for a little bootleg eye drug. If you're lucky, as it happens, a counselor attests I take the veterinary grade eye drug myself as a prophylactic because that's all you can get easily around here. I haven't felt better in years. Perhaps I had pinworms. Anyway, I don't have COVID. I also take vitamin D3 and zinc. Anathemize that, you chiseling bastards. Everybody I consort with has had enough of this whole nauseating game, the lying politicians, the lying media, the lying medical bureaucrats, the lying generals, the lying teachers, the lying celebrities, the lying tech moguls, the entire armature of counter-reality you want to impose on a once fair land. We will never do your bidding. We will never peel your grapes. There are more of us than you. Go ahead. Push just a little harder. Pretty stirring, huh? Oh, Greta Thunberg has weighed in on the Texas abortion debate. And so this is a woman who essentially wants to end the modern economy. So what do you think her view of abortion would be? I'm sorry, I have to swear here again. Very sweary show. I'm just reflecting the culture, I suppose. So Greta Thunberg tweeted today a graphic, a pie chart. Reasons why women have abortions. Personal choice, 60%. Not your concern, 10%. Mind your business, 8%. Fuck off, 22%. A charming young woman, isn't she? Oh, this is from Forbes, Carrie Porterfield. Bumble Match launch funds to cover abortion costs in Texas. Two of the most popular dating apps in the U.S., Match and Bumble, are kickstarting funds to help Texans access abortion services in the wake of a controversial new anti-abortion law that effectively bans the procedure after 6 weeks before many have realized they're pregnant. The message is from Match and Bumble clearly that, hey, if you get knocked up after a one-night stand, after using our services, we got your back. Good to know. Good to know. This is from Alana Mastrangelo at Breitbart. Left-wing actress Bette Midler suggests all women refuse to have sex with men in reaction to the Texas heartbeat law, which bans most abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. She said, I suggest that all women refuse to have sex with men until they are guaranteed the right to choose by Congress. Okay, I will make a personal declaration here that I will never have sex with Bette Midler. I mean, I try to be an ally. I do what I can. In 2019, actress and left-wing activist Alyssa Milano urged women to abstain from sex with men, claiming reproductive rights are being erased. Until women have legal control over our own bodies, we just cannot risk pregnancy, the actress added. Join me by not having sex until we get bodily autonomy back. I'm calling for a sex strike. Pass it on. Again, I will pledge to not have sex with Alyssa Milano or Cher or any of these other people. They're all really terribly frightening. Now, oh yes, Jen, not Jennifer Psaki, snapped at a reporter when asked, Joe Biden is a Catholic. He says he's a Catholic, and yet why is he so pro-abortion? Well, you're a man, so you don't know what it's like. Well, how does Jen Psaki believe that women get pregnant? Parthenogenesis? No. For the time being, at any rate, one needs a man, or at least tissue from a man in order to get pregnant. I'm sure that really riles up Jen, not Jennifer Psaki. This is from Jeff Poor at Breitbart. Thursday on Fox's Tucker Carlson Tonight, host Tucker Carlson took a dig at CNN's Jeffrey Toobin for his pro-abortion defense. Here's an interesting observation theory. Carlson said, The slogans that yell the loudest are the ones they believe the least. We've been noticing that recently. Volume is inversely proportional to sincerity. Maybe you scream it because you don't really believe it. And he talked about Tubin. Let's see. Where's the relevant section here? Well, Jeff Tubin knocked up a woman. Yes. There may not be room for a much more relevant fact, which is that Jeffrey Tubin once impregnated a co-worker's daughter and then pressured her to get an abortion. He knows this topic cold. Now, she refused, but in the process of pushing her to get an abortion unsuccessfully, Jeffrey Tubin learned what a lot of crappy men have learned over the years, which is this is a great option if you're a married guy who doesn't want to pay for more kids with random women. And then he denied a paternity and then refused to pay child support until ordered to do so. Charming fellow. Once again, yes, it's women that gestate babies and give birth to the babies, but there has to be a man involved or it doesn't take place. This fellow, Matthew Dowd. This is everyone associated with the George W. Bush administration is crazy and nasty. From Pam Key at Breitbart, former Bush strategist Matthew Dow said Thursday on MSNBC's Deadline that Republicans should have the word pro-life ripped out of their mouths. Yeah, those are the words that he used. Oh, yes, they constantly talk about pro-life and want nothing to do with anything about guns, want nothing to do with capital punishment, including health care of the people that may be born because of this. There's no Handmaid's Tale situation going on in Texas. The women who become pregnant and then decide afterwards that they don't want this, they did so willingly. Again, oh, this is too funny. The host of this show, Nicole Wallace, Republican, male governors are reaching, quote, deep inside of the uteruses of women, unquote. Impossibly tone deaf. You're defending abortionists, and you are saying, in these exact words, that it is the anti-abortionists who are reaching deep inside of the uteruses of women. And let's go back to Joseph Tainter and his book, The Collapse of Complex Societies. The evolution of complexity. The factors that lead to complexity are pertinent to understanding collapse. For the emergence of complex social institutions and their failure are inevitably intertwined. Unfortunately, despite the great advances that have been made in recent years in understanding complex societies, much about their origins remains controversial. Elman Service has hit upon one of the main reasons for this. He notes that long-standing states have acquired in their later history so many functions and features that their original functions are often obscured. This is an important point. The behavior of states at the point where they come to be studied by social scientists may have little relation to the reasons for their emergence. Furthermore, the evolution of states subsequent to their development may respond to a variety of new factors, including both internal and external political situations. Service is correct that these factors may make it difficult to ascertain the nature of early emerging states. Some modern theories have not taken this into account to the extent desirable. Similarly, though, many theories of state origins do not account for the persistence of this form once established. A number of authors have synthesized the different theories formulated to account for the origin of the state. The major lines of thought seem to be, in no particular order: 1, managerial. As societies come under stress or as populations increase in numbers, integrative requirements may arise that can be resolved by the emergence of managerial hierarchies. Examples of this approach include Wittvogel's argument that the need to mobilize labor forces for construction of irrigation works and the need to manage established water control facilities necessitates authoritarian government. Wright and Johnson's suggestion that the increasing need to process information arising from more and more information sources selects for both vertical differentiation and horizontal specialization. Isbell's elaboration of the classic argument that economic differentiation within a society requires centralized, hierarchically managed storage and redistribution of goods and produce, and Rathje's proposal that management of external trade and critical imports tends to complexity. 2, internal conflict. Theories within this school postulate that class conflict is the prime mover behind complexity. Fried, along with Marxist writers to be discussed later, maintains that the state emerged to protect the privilege of a limited few with preferential access to resources. Child's views were similar. 3, external conflict. Carniero argues that in circumscribed environments, bounded environments from which emigration is infeasible, stresses lead to conflict, while success at war necessitates the development of institutions to administer conquered groups. Webster has a different emphasis. He suggests that effective domination is impossible in chiefdoms, and that warfare in any event can offer only a short-term advantage. But a constant state of tension places a value on stable leadership and dampening of within-group competition. At the same time, acquisition of land through conquest that is outside the traditional system gives elites a capital resource that could be used to create new kinds of patron-client relations. 4, synthetic. Several interrelated processes generate complexity and state institutions. Colin Renfrew, for example, cites the influence of agriculture on social organization, of social factors on craft production, and so forth. These theories pertain to the emergence of pristine or primary states, those that arose independently in various parts of the world. States are dominating expansive organizations, and they have a competitive advantage over less complex social forms. They tend thus to either spread or to stimulate like developments among their neighbors. The emergence of complexity among the competitors and trade partners of states yields the process of secondary state formation. So far as is known, there have been only 6 instances of primary state formation. These are Mesopotamia, Egypt, circa 3500 to 3000 BC, China, Indus River Valley, circa 2500 BC, and Mexico and Peru, circa 0 AD. Some experts challenge the degree of independence of several of these developments, but that matter need not concern us here, and we'll have more from Joseph Tainter's The Collapse of Complex Societies on Monday. Let's talk about ABBA. ABBA's back in the news. I love ABBA. All good people love ABBA. They last recorded in 1982, and it wasn't all that long ago that they turned down some stupendous amount of money, $2 billion, something like that, to reunite and do a world tour. Yes, well, Agnetha is not going to tour, ever. She's the blonde woman. That's not going to happen. I don't know whether you know this. ABBA are referred to as a Swedish group, and certainly they got together in Stockholm, but Frida, or Anna-Frid Lyngstrand, is not, in fact, Swedish. Her mother was a Norwegian woman who was impregnated by a German soldier during World War II. And such was the hatred of such women and their progeny after 1945 that Anna-Frid and her mother fled to neighboring Sweden. Of course, ABBA stopped recording in 1982, but their records sell and sell and sell, and the extraordinary success of the musical Mamma Mia has taken their music around the world many times. They've said to be sold over 300 million records, but now they're back in virtual form. They have released 2 songs, I Still Have Faith in You and Don't Shut Me Down. According to Adrian Thrills at the Mail, the pop combo's first singles for 39 years didn't disappoint as the curtain raisers for a new studio album, Voyage, and virtual gigs next year. Anticipation for the album is sure to reach a fever pitch in the weeks leading to its arrival in November, while the digital concerts in May 22 at London's Olympic Park are certain to be among the hottest tickets of the year. The question is, have they still got it? According to The Guardian, they do. This is from Jude Rogers. ABBA's new songs reviewed a perky, moving return to pop's highest peaks. It is so powerful to hear Agnetha and Annafrid singing I Still Have Faith in You together after 40 years, and the slinky, cheeky Don't Shut Me Down is even better. Well, I'm very glad to hear it. I'm going to have let's look at the chat before I move on to the book club on Friday. Anran says, Kevin, all good people love Tchaikovsky too. I can't help it. As Nabokov would say, pushlust. The man he was a great tunesmith, but he had no taste whatsoever. Can't believe it took them that long to run out of money, says Brandon Smith. I don't think that they have run out of money at all. Just the royalties associated with Mamma Mia must be stupendous. Red Sulfur says Trump was not part of the permanent oligarchy. Neither was Nixon. Okay, what else do we have here? Chogokin 666 says men can get pregnant too. Bigot. Yes, many people have pointed out. Why is it that we're no longer talking about birthing people? Why not? Enron says, so if you don't love ABBA, you are a bad person? No, I'm not saying that. Not saying that at all. Why does KMG always say AE where it should be ah? Is that a Canadian thing? I don't know. You'd have to give me an example. But because half the population is stoned all the time. Where is that? What would that be? I don't know. Okay. Let's go to the book club. And there's some things that I have to open here. This book was published this year by a Terror House, and it is called Welcome to Hell by Bad Billy Pratt, and it is available directly from Terror House Press, and you can get it at Amazon, both in Kindle and paperback form. I thought that I would begin with some quotations. This book is largely about sex. So I thought I would read from a famous essay written by Tom Wolfe called The Me Decade and the Third Great Awakening. He says, let's talk about me. Let's find the real me. Let's get rid of all the hypocrisies and impedimenta and false modesties that obscure the real me. The apex of my soul is a spark of the divine, which I perceive in the pure moment of ecstasy, which your textbooks call the orgasm, but which I know to be heaven. That's how it seemed at the time in the 1970s. But the bloom has gone off that rose, certainly. If one goes to a bookstore and you find the sexology section or whatever, you'll find that most of the books are about some form of sexual dysfunction. There were genuinely a lot of people who believed in the 1970s that the freedom for people to have sex without consequences would lead to the greatest flowering of the human spirit that there had ever been. Well, it didn't work that way. And in fact, sex, I'm told that the young folks, they don't really care for it much. I mean, not in the sense of, a man and a woman actually, that sort of thing. They don't really care. They like to do it virtually. But even with the non-virtual sort, I mean, I'm reminded of what Louis Ferdinand Céline once wrote, and I suppose that Billy Pratt has been compared to Céline. All this fuss about a few drops of white mud. I don't know, it was pointed out at the time that with regard to Céline, that Ferdinand Barthélemy, the protagonist of his first book, Voyage à bord de la Voyage, yes, I'll just say it in English. A journey to the end of the earth. That he was not Celine. Okay, they're two separate people. This book, Welcome to Hell, is an autobiographical work, but again, I'm not going to claim that the narrator of this novel, which is really, it's a collection of vignettes about a man who I would guess appears to have been born in the late 1970s. You could call this book a Gen X elegy, actually. And I'm going to read from Christopher Lasch here. From 1977, as far back as that. It is precisely the separation of love and discipline that encourages, not merely in the kibbutz, but in the middle-class American family itself, the development of personality traits more compatible with totalitarian regimes than with democracy. A strong attachment to the peer group, a marked fear of being alone, more or less complete alienation from the past, such as Bruno Bettelheim notes in his study of the kibbutz. There is no permanence in human relations except with the peer group. A strong concern with personal authenticity in relations with others, unmediated by conventional forms of politeness or even by respect for the other's individuality, and a lack of introspection and of a highly developed inner life. There is an enormous amount of attention given in Welcome to Hell to the idea of authenticity, to the authentic. And there's a chapter called Authenticity and the Cable Guy. Let's run down some examples here. This book is pop culture-tastic, but there's a lot of references to Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, which of course is not the Gen X generation. In my mind, I'm Lou Reed. Billy Pratt writes, life is performance art, and you never settle for less than authentic. When Reed walked away from the Velvet Underground, having produced some of the best music of the decade that no one gave a shit about, he took a job picking up garbage on the beach. Lou fucking Reed collecting trash is what David Bowie must have thought when he offered to produce a solo record, The Incredible Transformer, which provided Reed's only mainstream hit, Walk on the Wild Side. With unprecedented career momentum, Lou cashed in with Sally Can't Dance, 1974, a terrible record that hit commercially. Well, you know, I'm a huge Velvet Underground fan, and Sally Can't Dance is indeed a terrible record. I'm not all that fond of Transformer, actually. I don't know how authentic it is. I mean, glam rock was big, so we're going to get glam rock Lou Reed. The author of this book is very fond of Stone Temple Pilots' album Purple, as am I, actually. And there's a lot about Scott Weiland in this book. Let's see. Like a drug dealer in a high school special, this is from Chubby Set of Bones, she gave me a taste and I was instantly hooked. This kind of emotional warfare would define all of my future relationships. I did my best to keep up. I wrote taunting poems accusing her of being spiritually dead and kind of fat. She wasn't, well, implying that I was effing another girl in her absence. When you can't compete, you try to win by disqualification. The others were inauthentic and insincere. This is from Suburbia. She'd always ask if I was happy how things turned out. What a question. Where do you begin? Well, it's not because I stuck around, not because I didn't go on these inauthentic, pretentious adventures. My favorite movie as a kid was Clue, 1985. I was obsessed with the Clue Mansion, a gorgeous, authentic-looking Tudor with a classic black and white tiled kitchen. There's a premium to suburban authenticity. The most you'll ever get is to enjoy it from afar, close your eyes, and take in the cold December air, the taste of midnight. They say it's best to ignore what you can't have, to hold it in disdain. You'll never get the Lamborghini. Bitcoin was a plebeian fantasy, a day late and $1 short on that too. What else is new? There's no personality to a middle-class home in modern suburbia. If you want something unique and authentic, you better know that it comes with a hefty price tag attached. When Alex moved to the city after graduate school, what you think was undesirable suddenly became shabby chic. The railroad-style apartment with few windows and impossibly hot summers was a self-imposed hardship to fondly remember. The stench of the street, awful at face value, carried with it a kind of otherness that was vacant in the sterile suburbs. Teenagers on bikes, smoking pot and blasting music. This was authentic. And I could give, well, many other examples, but I was just looking to, prove a point there. It seems to be a terrible kind of life, a hellish kind of life. This desire to prove what's, one is authentic. What does that mean, actually, authentic? There's a lot of discussion of writing in Welcome to Hell. Yes, the author, Billy Pratt, wants to be authentic. He wants to, write about what he knows, what he feels. But a novel is a product. Any artistic thing is a product, actually, if it's sent out into the world. And of course, when one speaks of authenticity, one runs into the problem of the persona. I mean, it's a commonplace that people play different roles when they're with different people. Everybody knows this. If one is visiting one's parents and, keeps all the F-bombs out of their speech and doesn't talk about, difficult things or sexual things, does that mean that one's interactions with one's parents are somehow inauthentic? I don't think so. But this is a book largely about sex, but Elizabeth Warren gets a look in. It begins with a discussion of REM and its record Automatic for the People. And the great year, 1992, when everything rocked. Metallica put out their classic self-titled album the year prior. Guns N' Roses had their epic Use Your Illusion double shot. Nirvana and Nine Inch Nails were changing the rules of the game by the minute and getting anyone still using hairspray hooked on Xanax. But it all seemed too good to be true. Maybe I was too young to understand music. He'd early confessed I had thought of myself as a kind of emerging rock critic, a junior Robert Christgau, compiling my own consumer guide to rock. MTV was able to marry music and image in a way that wasn't possible before. Even if they didn't invent the music video, they presented it with aggression. In the channel's purest form, MTV was an assault on the senses. They kept their stars in heavy rotation. You'd lose count of how many times Smells Like Teen Spirit, 1991, was shown in a single day. It was television programming without beginning or end, without shape or form, one that didn't necessitate undivided attention. It was something you'd be inclined to keep on all day, running in the background, feeding you a constant hum of subconscious messaging. The brand itself became part of your identity. In 1992, it was cool to like MTV. Every rock group I liked in 1992 existed as a component of MTV. But then it all fell apart because MTV, well, it's a curation, isn't it? And people don't like curation anymore. They like to choose what they want singly, hence YouTube. But let's get back to Elizabeth Warren. As she daydreams, Elizabeth Warren can't help but imagine her face tear-stained and her eyes bloodshot. She never bought into being the hero of her own story. Only in fantasy can she come to terms with the reality she's desperate to hide. I used to have a reoccurring nightmare where I'd show up to elementary school in my underwear. I'd realize it midway through the day, horrified, glimpsing at my bare legs under the desk. Once I noticed, I knew others would too. So the professor made a lame joke about body shame. But he was wrong. It was never about body shame. It was tied to a subconscious fear that my ineptitude will eventually catch up with me. This felt hauntingly inevitable. When a problem begins, it can be easily ignored. Ignore it for long enough, and it will grow into something encompassing and destructive. Elizabeth was never invited to the cool kids' table. When she tried to get on the wavelength of the hip, hold on a sec, I'm going to get me a beer, she could never find the right frequency. A craft that should have been honed in her college days when a young girl looking foolish comes off as adorable, and any misunderstanding could be forgiven with a blushing giggle. But that ship had sailed long ago for Elizabeth, and she knew it, now finding her only solace in imagining herself sitting on the chest of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, stifling her breath and dropping heavy fists into the bridge of her nose. AOC understands that the new era of politician must seem relatable in a highly specific way. Young voters want to see themselves reflected in their politicians. No longer are politicians intended to be aspirational. They want their political representatives to participate in social media image management, which comprises the bulk of a millennial's daily activities. The authenticity put forth must be carefully crafted and controlled, a concept that AOC intrinsically understands and a language that Warren doesn't speak. Warren is still running on the old MTV Arena Rock formula. She wants to tell you the story and she expects you to believe it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez understands that the path to power is no longer linear. A linear path comes across as alienating and fascist. Millennials don't want a rock star. They want an anti-rock star. They're very well observed, I must say. And I was going to say that I suppose it would be tempting to compare Billy Pratt to Michel Houellebecq. Yes, to a certain extent, but apart from this section about Elizabeth Warren, what you get in Houellebecq's novels is not only, sex and despair and perhaps nihilism, if you want to call it that, but you also get an examination, a socio-political examination of France. And there is very little about politics in Welcome to Hell. What there is a series of hookups with women, mostly older women in their 30s, I suppose. Divorced, their husbands left them. Sometimes there's a kid or some such, And this book is very powerful in demonstrating how these hookups, they breed anomie, they breed alienation. And worse than that, they bring about a desire to go further. And there are passages in here which I'm not going to read because they might be considered disturbing. I need a more powerful dopamine hit in order to get what I was getting before. So the sex has to become more degrading. Now, what I read, from Abigail Schreier and the like, is that something like 40% of young people who engage in sex seem to believe that there's a very close connection between it and something regarding torture, which is obviously a problem. Billy Pratt talks a lot in this book about people who get married at a young age, which is something, that hip people wouldn't want to do. I mean, why would you want to tie yourself down to one woman at the age of, 21 or something like that? Well, when you could just keep sampling the smorgasbord until you're 30 or 40 even. Maybe push it even beyond that. Well, there's an obvious difficulty with this because the associations that one makes at a young age are the most powerful in one's life. And a young couple, a man and a woman, a man and a wife, they make very powerful connections when they get married early. The longer you put this off and the more sexual partners you have had, the more difficult it becomes to form a real union, because it's just yet another iteration of the same. And of course, people who mock the idea of getting married early, oh, what if I made a mistake? Well, we look at things today differently than we did in the past. What, you think you're going to find the perfect woman there? Perfect in terms of looks, perfect in terms of sexuality, perfect in terms of personality, of compatibility? When does that ever happen? And in any event, people are always looking for problems with each other. But again, if you go through X amount of women, or women go through X amount of men, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, you're always going to be fine. No one is ever good enough for you. And then frequently you get to a point where at a certain age you decide, well, I'm going to settle. Well, of course, a great many women in their late 30s or 40-ish find out that that's quite difficult, because what they have to offer is not what they had to offer 15 or 20 years ago. Similarly, men have the problem that, okay, yeah, it's time for me to settle down. Settle down with whom? A woman who's had 40, 50 sexual partners? A woman who's used to what we used to call playing the field? How is that likely to work out? How many times has this woman been married before? Does she have children? That's a minefield all on its own. Because, okay, so you have this wife, so you want to cement the relationship, so let's have a baby. Okay, but she already has a child, and there's going to be a competition between her child and your child. Depend on it. And the woman is entirely likely to believe, whether she says it or not, that somehow you are favoring your own child over her child. So it's good to get married early. Not something that I did, but there's it's funny. I recall that after Columbine, Mark Stein wrote that he was surprised by the number of people who told him that they wouldn't return to their old high schools without a machine gun. It's certainly the way I feel. But Billy Pratt does not feel that way, and that he expresses contempt for such people. Well, I suppose there's no accounting for taste. But this is it's really quite a well written a book, and it is full of a great many insights, like the one about MTV and Elizabeth Warren. Now, there's numerous references to Delicious Tacos, whose novel Finally Some Good News I reviewed some time ago on the book club. Billy Pratt is a much less, how would I say, explicit writer than Delicious Tacos. I will certainly say that. This novel, in a lot of ways, it seems like the kind of thing that one would write at the end of one's career, not the beginning of one's career. It's curious in that regard. And there's a great deal of discussion about writing itself. I very much look forward to what Billy Pratt has coming next, but I'd have to say that I would prefer it if it came in the form of a traditional novel. Notwithstanding that, I can strongly recommend this book, particularly those, say, who are older than Billy Pratt's cohort, or younger and Billy Pratt's cohort, who seek to understand that generation. I'm not saying that his insights are, entirely peculiar to his generation. No, not at all. Hell is where our protagonist ends up, and I suppose the hell, is it's the freedom. It's the result of license. I suppose we got what we wanted, or a great many men got what they wanted. And how did that work out for them, as they say? So those are my thoughts on Welcome to Hell by Bad Billy Pratt, which is published by the very enterprising Terror House, an organization which I must commend highly. Thanks, Matt. So let's have a final look at the chat. Okay, here we go. Matt Forney says in Marlowe's Faust, Mephisto tells Faust that hell is not a place, but a state of mind. Yeah, I'm reminded in the book, Billy Pratt talks about hell being cold, not hot, which I found interesting. It reminded me of the title of one of Fassbinder's films, Love is Colder. Love is colder than death. Who are we talking about here? Before his conversion, his views on women were in line with Shia, no education, etc. There's very little culturally, Muslim about Rush. His Muslim father was an atheist. I reviewed Rush's book about his conversion, which I quite liked. It does sound like an interesting book. Is there a discount for KMG fans? Enron says, Kevin, I'll forgive you for slandering the great Peter Ilyich and remind you that a lot of seemingly smart people detest the great Sibelius. Well, Tchaikovsky was a great influence on the young callow Sibelius. He grew out of it, though, or assimilated it, if you will. True Greenberg says marriage, if both the man and the woman, and necessarily one man and one woman, solemnly take it as a sacred right, can be very restorative in these immoral, promiscuous times, a new beginning. Okay. Old man KMG channel. She doesn't speak a word in the whole episode. Okay. Rush ran up against the limits of searching for the perfect woman. It became a devout Christian because of it, says Matt Forney. Yeah, again, this talk of the one, it's exasperating to me. It's just stupid. There's one, is there? Well, what if this, woman lives in Jacksonville, Florida, and you live in Saskatoon? What if this woman lives in a small village in Germany, say? Well, you're never going to meet her, are you? And, okay. I think that's it. What's coming up on the show next week? On Monday, on Music Monday, I'm going to talk about the great Stan Ridgway. In any just world, Stan Ridgway would be a household name and a very rich man. But we don't live in a just world. Next week on the book club, I'm going to be discussing The True History of the Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Diaz. And on Theater Thursday, I am going to be discussing Jacques Tati's 1967, how would you call this? A dystopian view of a bureaucratic future. It's called Playtime. So I will be back on the air Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be really greatly appreciated and is really kind of needed greatly at this time, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace at hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.